Hi, welcome to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is why I disagree with the Duran, and specifically the video called Biden quietly moves world closer towards Armageddon, Finland ready to host nukes. And this was published on the 29th of October. Now, the main topic of the video is basically the nuclear war, between the possibility of a nuclear war between Russia and the US. And, well, if we talk about nuclear Armageddon, a nuclear war between America and the US, and if you have watched my previous videos and followed me, then you would have noticed that I cannot agree with this assessment. There cannot be, or there will be, no nuclear military exchange between the two superpowers. Unless, and there's always the unless and if and but, if there's an idiot or a psychopath that presses that button and that specific person wants to commit suicide. As I've stated many times, nuclear exchange is a red line where you cannot turn back, and it will result in mutual assured destruction. And who in his right mind will do that? So we are constantly talking about this over and over in all the media and all the pro-Western and all the pro-Russian pundits. But nobody really understands what it really means. Mutually assured destruction. No turning back. In any case, so let us proceed with discussion of the Duran's article. Firstly, they started to talk about the national defense strategy, and I would like to spend some time on that. Now, according to Alex, there is no limitations of the nuclear weapons to be used by the US. And he asked basically Alexandra if the US have abandoned now the mutually assured destruction principles, and we know that the Pentagon is willing to launch a first strike, nuclear strike. Then Alexandra goes on and then he discusses a meeting held by the superpowers in apparently January, where all the major nuclear powers, US, America, Britain, Russia, and China, clearly stated that they understand the principle of MAD, and that a nuclear war cannot be fought and cannot be won. And then Alexander states that Biden actually now has regressed on that statement, and that is now, the US is now willing to use nuclear first strike, according to the latest US national defense strategy. Now, you can read a lot of articles about this matter and this national defense strategy, and everybody article says that the US will consider a first strike option. But it is not. Yes, the national defense strategy does allow for it, but you have to read very carefully the document. And Alexander could have downloaded the document. It's fairly available, a declassified version. And on page, I think it's 44 or 45, you can get the paragraph that addresses this issue. And I would like to quote from that document. The United States will only consider the use of nuclear weapons in extreme circumstances to defend the vital interests of the United States and its allies and its partners. While the United States maintains a very high bar for the employment of nuclear weapons, our nuclear posture is intended to complicate an adversary's entire decision calculus, including whether to instigate a crisis, initiate armed conflict, conduct strategic attacks using non-nuclear capabilities, or to escalate to the use of nuclear weapons on any scale." End quote. And what it means and what it clearly states is, it is clear that the US will not use a nuclear strike on anybody just for the sake of it. They are fully aware of the consequences of using stuff, and they clearly express that. This policy is so formulated in order to complicate an adversary's entire decision calculus. And it means that any adversary to the US will have to take it into account, and he will not be sure that the US will not use nuclear weapons, and therefore he will think twice before attacking the US or the allied forces. And that creates a certain form of doubt, and that is the purpose of these wordings. And I would like to quote again. In a different paragraph. It says that to deter strategic attacks, any adversary use of nuclear weapons, regardless of location or yield, would fundamentally alter the nature of a conflict, create a potential for uncontrolled escalation, and have strategic effect, end quote. This means, again, that Americans are fully aware that using even a limited strategic nuclear device is a dangerous red line from which you cannot return. It will ultimately escalate into full-out nuclear exchange and thereby the mutually assured destruction. So it's not that these guys have written a document that advocates the use of nuclear weapons. Either a first strike or a limited strategic use of nuclear weapons. So you can interpret it like you want, but if you look at the wording, it clearly states what the objective is. Now compare that to the Russian ones, where they clearly state point 1, point 2, and point 3. There is no doubt about the use when the Russians will use nuclear weapons. And so if America would like to attack, say, America, they know precisely how the Russians will respond. But again, like I said, it is the American doctrine is so written that if somebody attacks the US, they are not totally sure whether the US will actually use nuclear weapons, and therefore it complicates their calculus. And that's the whole point. So if you can look what I've just now discussed, it does not violate the statements made by Biden at the beginning of the year. Again, I would like to state that Alexandra could have easily read this document, but lately it seems to me that he's reading the headings of certain articles and then decides on what the content should be, because he believes he knows what is going on. Yes, in most cases he does know. So sometimes one needs to read the article, and not only one, but multiple of them. Again, one has to state that articles are written by somebody else based on their information and their interpretation of the facts and their opinion. And that is why one has to be careful in referencing other people's articles. In any case, there are a number of articles that do agree with my assessment, but I'm not going to list them all. So I would just like to say again, I'll quote from some of them. The NPR said the US would only consider the use of nuclear weapons in extreme circumstances to defend the interests of the nation in addition to allies and partners. So that's a loose translation or a loose quote. In one article, it also stated that the NPR said the administration retained the goal of moving to a sole purpose determination, which actually means that the US wants to compile or go to a certain goal where they can declare that the use of nuclear weapons will only be used under defined statements, similar to Russia. That means they want to get rid of this ambiguity, whatever that name, English word is. Ambiguity? Yeah. Uncertainty in any case. And you can use all of this contained in the NPR, and you can read it yourself. The link is in the description, and the relevant information is on page 44 and 45. Then also another article said, a senior US official said that Biden has decided not to follow through on his 2020 pledge to declare that the sole purpose of nuclear weapons is to deter a nuclear attack against the United States or its allies. Instead, he approved a version of a policy from the Obama administration that leaves open the option to use nuclear weapons not only in retaliation to a nuclear attack, but also to respond to non-nuclear threats. And then they say that he's basically backtracking on his election promise. But again, it is not really Biden's policy. It was a continuation of a policy determined by Obama. And then Alexandra proceeds makes a statement that a new nuclear race has been established, but I cannot see any evidence for that. We all should know by now that the Americans are busy investing a lot of money in upgrading their nuclear missile systems. And so have the Russians done. And some of their new missiles will be shortly deployed. Yeah, that's the right word. So there is no evidence for a nuclear escalation or an arms race, except for China. But China is behind, and he has to catch up with the US in order to get on par with the nuclear stockpiles that the Americans have, in order for the same threat, or not the same thing, to deter the US to get involved in a war with China. But again, then Alexander makes some statement that China has much more bigger industrial base than US, and yes and no. China has a larger industrial base as the US. But nuclear missiles are not manufactured by industrial base. It is manufactured by the nuclear industrial base. And one has to ask yourself, which one is bigger? I don't know. Doesn't matter. I don't think so. Again, all three superpowers have acknowledged the MAD principle, and it will not use nuclear weapons willy-nilly. And it is nowhere expressed that the US will do it in the national defense strategy. And then Alexander and Alex talk about the forward deployment of nuclear weapons. Now, I have made a video about the B-61 bomb that is currently deployed in Europe, and you can watch the video at the link in the description. Now, the B-61 is an old version, not the oldest, it's an older version, and it is recently being upgraded by the B-61/12, which means the 12th variant of the bomb. It is a normal airdropped gravity bomb. Yes, it has some improvements like selectable yield, flight control, where they can control the flight path and so on, or the drop path, or whatever you want to call it, but it's still a bomb that falls out of an aircraft. Basically, the B-61 and its variants is a relic of the old Cold War, where you had the NATO in the west, and you had the Warsaw Pact in the east. And the dividing line was basically the border, and all you had to do is cross that border, and that was very near to these bomb locations. But unfortunately now, that dividing line has shifted to the Russian border, and that's far, far away from the current storage of the bombs. So these bombs have no military benefit to the modern Europe-Russia standoff, if you want to call it like that. And then one also have to look at, technology has developed so much, the accuracy and the development of Russian missiles, especially long-distance missiles, their hypersonic missiles, etc., etc. Now, I'm not sure that these storage weapons will survive, or they'll probably be destroyed in the first couple of minutes of any conflict. And I just will again reference an article from the Eurasian Times, and I would like to quote: "The modernization of the US B-61 nuclear weapons have been underway for years, and plans to safely and responsibly swap out older weapons for the upgraded B-61/12 version, and is part of a long-planned and scheduled modernization effort. It is in no way linked to current events in Ukraine and was not sped up in any way." That comes from a Pentagon spokesman, Brigadier General Patrick Ryder, who told it to Politico. End quote. So again, this is not additional bombs, as Alexander tries to tell us, but it's an upgraded replacement bombs. So this is not that more, Alexander says that more nuclear weapons are stored. No, it's not. It is being replaced. Now, in my last video, when I talked about 61, these bombs were also stored in Britain, but they have been removed, I think in 2008, if I remember correctly. And until now, those facilities in Britain have remained empty. Well, now there are plans to reuse that facility, so there will be some additional bombs stored in Britain. For what reason, I don't know, but that's it. So basically what Alexander has told us so far is all false and is not what was said. Again, it seems to me they didn't read the article. So what I would like to talk about is now the article about Finland, because Alexander says that Finland, or that nuclear weapons will now be stored in Finland. And again, in a recent article, 29th October, it was said, and I quote, "Finnish Prime Minister Sanna Marin won't rule out the US-led bloc deploying weapons of mass destruction in a Nordic country. NATO could establish permanent bases or deploy nuclear weapons in Finland once the country joins the bloc," said the Prime Minister of Sanna Marin, has warned. Although she added that this scenario is unlikely. "I've considered it very important that we don't set these kinds of preconditions or limit our own room for maneuvering when it comes to the permanent basis on nuclear weapons," Marin said on Finland's Y1E TV1 channel on Saturday. She promptly qualified the statement by adding that such a development was not necessarily on the cards, end quote. Now, if you listen carefully, it means that the Prime Minister of Finland left all the options open. But she hasn't committed to the deployment of nuclear weapons, nor American military, NATO military bases on their soil. And that is just highly unlikely. But she wants to leave the options open, which one can understand. And that is all that she said, nothing more, nothing less. One has to just look a little bit about the whole story. And that is that these bombs, once they are on your soil, They are guarded by US soldiers. The country, the host country, has no control over these weapons. Yes, they do have an input when they are going to be used, but let's make it very clear. The Americans do what they want. So they're not going to ask Finland's permission to use these bombs once they want to use them. They will use them. Don't ignore Finland. That is how they work. Secondly, storing these nuclear weapons makes you a nuclear target. Well, a first strike target. Because say your enemy is Russia. The first thing Russia will do is destroy all these nuclear stockpiles. And in the meantime, nuclear ICBMs will be pointed at the capital of Finland. So why would anybody want to become a nuclear power if you don't control the weapons? Why do you want to store US nuclear bombs on your soil when firstly they have no military strategic value, number one, and number two is it makes you a first strike of a nuclear ICBM. Why? So I'm not totally sure why anybody would like to do that. I mean, even the countries that are currently storing these B-61 bombs, which is Italy, Netherlands, Germany, and Spain, they wanted to get rid of these bombs, but then the US refused to remove them. Come on, they don't want it, so why would Finland now suddenly do it? In any case, also, you know, these weapons are stored currently in Europe under the nuclear sharing program. But the nuclear sharing program is actually a violation of the NPT, the non-proliferation or non-nuclear proliferation treaty. Any case, nuclear protective treaty. Yeah, okay. And many countries are part of this NPT. And storing nuclear weapons in Finland, which is going to be seen as a violation of the NPT, will be counted by a majority of the world's countries. And then if the Americans violate the NPT, then a lot of countries will either then abandon the NPT and then start developing their own nuclear weapons and then we what we are what? Then it all goes haywire. So again, won't be possible. And even if that fails, then Russia will take in any case actions, as they have done now in Ukraine. Because the indivisible security principle is non-negotiable. So when Finland was neutral, they had nothing to fear from Russia. But now, if they are joining NATO and they don't allow nuclear bombs and so on, they have nothing to fear from Russia. But if they employ or store these weapons, then should start really worrying about Russia and start to fear them. So, and well, one has to ask yourself now, do you want to agree with Alexander on the assessment? I don't. Unfortunately, it's full of holes and lack evidence for their statements. And then they even discussed Taiwan, that the US might even store nuclear weapons in Taiwan. I'm not going to even go there and discuss it any further. It's one of the most ridiculous assumptions, or you could call it proposals. So, again, I couldn't agree with the Duran. I'm sorry. I do agree with some other of the videos, no problem, but not with this one. So, that's it for today. So please subscribe to the channel, spread the word, tell your friends, and until next time, cheers.